I laughed at my boss's disabled daughter and I got fired for it. To get revenge, I married her. Technically she's not my boss's daughter, but the daughter of the guy who owns the entire company. This happened in front of him. Everything was going great, until last week, when we were scheduled to have our quarterly retreat. Since we were the main regional office in the area, all of the employees from the satellite locations came to our office for the retreat. I had been with the company for 3 months and was still on orientation, so I was still learning the ropes. The owner of the company rarely visits our office. He's been overseeing the setup of a new satellite office for the last year, according to my coworkers. But he was there for the retreat, as was his disabled daughter, Amy. One of my coworkers told me Amy works at one of the satellite offices and I probably wouldn't have much interaction with her, but I should be nice. That seemed like a no-brainer. I'm nice to everyone, regardless. I won't claim to be an expert on Amy's disability, but it seemed like she had childlike mannerisms and struggled with expressing herself. She also had some problems with motor skills. I'll describe the only interaction I had with her prior to the incident. I went to refill my coffee and Amy was in front of me, getting her coffee. I watched her struggle with getting condiments added and putting the lid on, so I politely asked if she needed any help. She thanked me, said she did, and let me finish making it. While I was making it, she said she hated coffee, but her dad made her drink it because she had to be always alert. I smiled, said that was definitely important, and handed her the cup. She thanked me again and went back to the office her dad was using, where she had been most of the day. I felt like I had been a good Samaritan and went on my way. Most of the retreat is team building exercises. Prior to the incident, Amy only participated in the puzzle race, where groups put puzzles together without the box art to see which team could finish faster. Amy wasn't in my group, so I didn't have any interaction with her there. My team did not win, and hers obviously didn't. The big event, and the one that everyone seemed the most excited for, was the last activity of the day. Our boss gave us a list of potential clients. We were supposed to select 3 as a group, and put together something to attract the customer. The job was in sales and advertising. We were told we would be judged on our creativity. My group explained that we could do pictures, slogans, jingles, whatever we wanted. Each person expected to work on one individually, then work with their group to polish it up before it was presented to everyone. It was kind of a big deal because at previous retreats, there would be clients on the list the owner was already close to bringing on board, and if you impressed the owner, you might just land that account. I went with a jingle, rhymed a few words, and recorded it. It was silly but fit the brand. My group gave me some pointers, we made some improvements, and I recorded the final product for submission. I helped my team with their projects until it was time to turn everything in. After everything was turned in, we gathered in the big conference room to critique each other. The owner went through them one by one. If it was a picture or storyboard, he'd put it up, read it, and we'd make comments. Good or bad. There were some that were great which drew a lot of compliments, and some that were really bad, which we laughed about as a group. You could tell the senior account managers didn't care much about the exercise or put much effort into their pitches. Nobody seemed to get upset or offended, regardless of the feedback. When my jingle was played, it got a lot of comments, not all of them good, and I took the feedback with a smile. After getting my feedback, I felt a little more comfortable about sharing my thoughts on other presentations. I gave what I thought was valuable feedback to a few products, laughed at a couple others, and then a rather crude drawing was put up for the exact same company I had chosen. I immediately joked, well, at least my jingle was better than that. Did a 3-year-old draw it? And laughed. To absolute silence. I was really confused because plenty of people had made jokes and everyone laughed. Instead, a few people looked at me like I was disgusting and the owner said, well, if you don't have anything nice to say, keep it to yourself, maybe? Then my boss scooted down to where I was sitting and told me I needed to go to my desk right now. I noticed as I was gathering my things that the owner's daughter was red-faced and starting to tear up. The team building exercise was over for me. I went back to my desk and it began to sink in that the drawing must have been drawn by the owner's daughter. There was no warning or anything. The owner didn't reveal who put together what we were looking at until after a few critiques. Maybe I should have known? Everyone was joking and having fun up to that point. Someone else had a pretty bad drawing that got laughed at. Either way, I felt awful. As soon as the event was over, I approached my boss to apologize. He told me to wait for him in his office. Long story short, I was fired. My boss said since I was still on orientation, he had decided I wasn't a good fit for the company, so it was better to let me go now. He didn't outright say I was being fired for making fun of her drawing, but that's literally the only thing that I've ever gotten in trouble for. My work, up until that point, had been praised. I didn't get much time to process it because my boss had already called security, who showed up fairly quickly, and escorted me to my desk to gather my things before escorting me out of the building. An hour later, I got a call from one of my former teammates, who asked if I wanted to join the team for a drink one last time. They needed it after the retreat, and felt bad that they didn't warn me. I wasn't feeling up for it, but I wanted to try and make sense of the whole situation, so I went to the bar. In the back of my mind, I was thinking that since I'm about to start looking for a new job, a few references from former coworkers wouldn't be bad since I definitely won't be getting one from my boss or the owner of the company after everything that happened. The team explained that Amy comes to all of these retreats, and she always does some crude drawing like that. Everyone just sort of knows to say nice things about it, and move on. One of my teammates said that once you've seen one of her drawings, you know what to look for. Well, I didn't, and nobody warned me. I started to get pretty upset that this was a known thing and everyone knew but me, but what could I do? I had already screwed up and it cost me my job. The team also shared more about Amy. Apparently she works at one of the satellite offices but doesn't really do anything. The people in charge of the office try to come up with stuff for her to do because she gets upset when she's bored. The team said the way the people who worked there described it, they were basically her babysitter so she wouldn't bother her dad all day when he spent most of his time there, and after he moved on to establish the new satellite office, he didn't take Amy with him because she liked all the friends she had at that office. They also said that her dad had harassed a few single guys at the office to take her on dates, which seemed pretty inappropriate, but he does own the company. My team said Amy desperately wants a boyfriend and wants to get married, which she talks about all the time. The consensus seemed to be that there's no way she actually understands how relationships or marriage works, and her dad probably put this idea in her head to begin with. At this point I was just frustrated with the owner. Why did he feel the need to force his employees to take care of his disabled child? It is in no way part of their job description. He has plenty of money to actually pay a professional to take care of her. One of my teammates joked that dating Amy wasn't a bad deal, because whoever married her would inherit the company since she is the old man's only kid. I wasn't really in the mood for jokes at that point after losing my job over one, so I told them I needed to go. But then I got to thinking, wouldn't that be a fitting revenge? Oh, and the cherry on top? Amy sent me a Facebook friend request over the weekend. After sitting on it for a few days, I accepted the friend request. I immediately messaged Amy. I said I shouldn't have made that joke about anyone's work, it was unprofessional, and I was sorry. It took her a while to respond, but when she finally did, she thanked me for my apology, but said she sent me the request because she wanted to apologize since I lost my job over it. Amy and I ended up messaging back and forth until almost 3 a.m. We spent a lot of time talking about her. That's just the direction it went, so I asked questions since she seemed comfortable talking about it. We eventually circled back to the drawing and my terrible response to it. She wasn't that offended by my response, because she assumed I didn't know. She got upset, primarily, because she knew all hell was about to break loose and she had no way to communicate with anyone. She was so upset when she found out I got fired, and tried to talk to her dad, but he wouldn't listen to her. She's fully aware that a lot of people at the company just pretend to be nice to her because she's the owner's daughter, but she does have a few friends at the satellite office where she works who better understand her disability. It was getting late for both of us at that point. Really late. She asked if I had watched the first episode of the new season of Game of Thrones yet, which I have, and she asked if I'd like to talk about it after she watched it. I told her I'd love to, and that maybe for episode 2 we could watch it together. And so that was our first date. Over a period of 6 months, I slowly gained her confidence, and we started dating. She just wanted someone who would listen and spend time with her, which I was happy to do. She was honestly a very kind soul. I still didn't like her father, but he was so happy that Amy was able to have a long-time boyfriend. He even rehired me and promoted me rapidly at work. He was the one who first suggested that we should get married. I could tell that it wasn't in good faith. He just wanted to dump Amy onto someone else. He saw her as a burden. A burden that I was happy to take. We are set to get married in July.
What's the most bone-chilling sentence a loved one has said to you? Those girls are not my son's children. There hasn't been a girl born on my husband's side of the family in more than 100 years. There's a strong belief that the men in his family cannot produce female babies. On our wedding night, my mother-in-law looks me dead in the eye and says, "Now go make us our son. Don't you dare let us down." I nervously laughed, and we departed. Over our honeymoon, we got pregnant with a baby girl. Everyone was so shocked when we announced it was a girl, and most of the family denied it up until the moment she was born. That's when the horrible comments started. Whenever my husband isn't around, my mother-in-law and her family members make snarky comments like, "I wonder where she got that nose." It's definitely not the husband's. This hurt me, but I could handle it all right, so I didn't make a big deal about it. I had no idea how far my mother-in-law would take things. Well, as it would happen, we are now expecting our second baby, and yes, it is another girl. I begged my husband not to tell the mother-in-law the gender when we found out, as I just wanted to enjoy a bit more of this pregnancy before she ruined it. I had decided to keep the mean comments his mother made to me about our first daughter to myself, as she's old and in poor health, and I felt guilty about potentially ruining their relationship when she probably doesn't have many years left to be around. Regardless, he insists on announcing it at our next visit, and we do exactly that. As soon as she heard it was another girl, tears welled in her eyes and she started shaking her head back and forth and sobbing. She then started yelling at me, called me a cheater, and demanded I get out of her house. My husband immediately stands up and starts yelling at her, asking what her problem is and insisting that she needs to apologize to me and watch her mouth in front of her grandkids. She says through broken sobs, "Not ours, not ours. Those girls are not ours. She's a cheater. A cheater. Those girls are not my son's children." I start crying hysterically and pick up my daughter, who is utterly confused as to why daddy is yelling at grandma and mommy is now crying. My mother-in-law then looks at me and starts yelling, "I let you get away with it the first time. I accepted you and his family. I allowed my son to believe he fathered that stupid girl, but I will not allow it again." My husband is now furious. He gets extremely mad and starts screaming at her that she is out of line and asks how dare she call his daughter names. He then goes on to say that we are leaving, and until she comes to her senses, she will never see any of us again. She tried to say something more, but he cuts her off and yells at her, "By the way, Mom, I love that little girl more than I ever loved you." As he is ushering us out the door, I cried and broke down and told my husband all the little comments she and her family have said to me when he's not around while we drive the 2 hours home. We went no contact for a few months, and everything seemed to be going great. Then when I was nearing my due date, we decided to be the bigger person and reach out to her and offer her a chance to make things right. I would regret that later. She whined that she misses my husband and granddaughter. We agreed to meet for dinner at their house after a few weeks for a proper talk and an apology from her. We arrive, dinner is served, and we are trying to make small talk when my husband says, "Yeah, Mom, this has all been nice, but we need to talk about what happened and the things you said last time we were here. I know and you know that you owe my wife an apology." My mother-in-law then looks at my husband and says, "Yes, do you have the paternity test?" I am not apologizing until I'm proven wrong, and we both know I'm right. You cannot be the father, and the fact that you have now apparently fathered 2 girls is ridiculous. What the hell is wrong with you? I start to cry and go to get up to grab my things and go to the car. My mother-in-law says, "Oh no, you don't." She shoots up, rounds the table, grabs my shirt, and proceeds to scream at me, "How dare you try to run away from this? You're a cheater, and you need to own up to this problem." My husband screams at her to get her hands off of me and starts to make his way towards us. She then decides that I cannot be allowed to leave at any cost with her son. She slaps me across my face. My husband then gets in between me and his mom and starts to scream at her. My husband is furious, and I'm crying hysterically. He grabs my hand, and we are making our way to the door when my mother-in-law grabs a snow globe from a shelf and throws it directly at me. It connects with the back of my head. I fell to my knees from the pain, and before my husband can put together what just happened, she is grabbing anything she can find to throw in my direction. I'm on my knees on the ground, holding my head with one hand and my belly with the other. My husband is screaming at the top of his lungs for her to stop, and she proceeds to try to get close enough to kick me. Thankfully she is old and in bad health, so she loses momentum quickly, and as a last resort, my husband pushes his mom, and she falls back into a shelf by the front door, and he rushes me out. He drives me to the hospital, and I end up getting 6 stitches in my head and being monitored in the hospital for 4 days. The baby ended up being fine, and the hospital demanded we file a police report. We find out that when my husband pushed his mom into the shelf, she ended up breaking 2 fingers and is claiming the excessive force hurt her neck very badly. The police showed up and took our side of the story and compared it to our own report that we filed once at the hospital. They told us that my mother-in-law is demanding to press charges against my husband for assault while we are pressing charges against her. So then my husband gets arrested but then quickly released after my father-in-law is forced to tell the truth, and my mother-in-law then gets arrested. My father-in-law is now begging us to drop the charges as no one was hurt, and that we are being cruel to lock up an elderly woman. We are currently at home waiting for baby number 2 to arrive. I am on a strict bed rest order, and my husband has taken the week off of work to help pamper me and take care of our first daughter. I asked my husband if once baby number 2 arrives, we get paternity tests for both girls to send to his mom in jail as a huge FU. He thinks it's a hilarious idea and thinks we should also make copies and send them to all the relatives who were entertaining his mom's craziness, along with a written letter saying goodbye. We would mention that none of them will ever see us or his daughters again, and that he hopes they're all happy knowing that they've ruined any chance they had to have a relationship with our children.
What is the absolute worst thing you have ever caught your dad doing? I was walking towards the kitchen when I noticed that my dad's door was open. I quickly peeked inside, and saw him sitting at his computer. Now I had just woken up and was pretty hungry, so I would have just kept moving, but then he clicked and all of a sudden the entire computer screen was taken up by a picture of a woman's thighs. I focused my vision, and realized that the background of the photo was the weather from the news. My dad was looking at the weather lady's thighs. He closed that image, and then opened another. Same thing, but it was a different weather lady. This time he had to zoom in on her thighs. I watched him do this multiple times. Most of the pictures were already cropped to just show the thighs, but all the women I could see were Latina. And these were some thick thighs. Now normally you might think that this isn't that bad, but the issue is that my mom doesn't have legs. She was in a bad car accident a few years ago, and had lost her legs as a result. She is now in a wheelchair, and my dad had been nothing but a perfect and supportive husband, at least from what I could see. Up until now. In fact, the reason my mom was out of the house was for her PT. I was pretty sure that my mom didn't know about my dad's obsession with thick Latina weather lady thighs, as he was doing this while she was out of the house like he was hiding it. Anyways, I moved on towards the kitchen to make breakfast, still in shock over what I had seen. I had no idea what I was going to do. Later that night, while my parents were out for a dinner date, I went in and investigated my dad's computer. I knew his passcode, but I also knew that he wouldn't just have the pictures on his computer in an obvious place. The first thing I did was check his search history. My dad, being of an older generation, hadn't conditioned himself to use incognito tabs when he was doing his dirty browsing. I immediately found searches for thick thighs, and Latina weather lady thighs. I started laughing a bit to myself, and then found this website that he had visited. It was really weird, like this whole community for people with the same obsession as my dad. He was even sort of active in the chats on the website. There were like unlimited pictures on this website. They all had download links on them. I saw one of his chat logs discussing the best ways to name folders so that nobody would open them. This allowed me to quickly find his hidden folder, which he had named system_logs. He definitely was trying to keep this a secret. I kid you not, his folder had thousands of these images downloaded. After that, I decided to log out and sleep on it. I decided that this information could be useful to me. My dad had always been the stricter parent, and now having something on him could certainly help me out in certain situations. So I sat on this intel, for like 2 weeks, until there was this party at this guy Alex's house. His parents were out of town, and he was inviting everyone who was anyone. I told my dad that I was heading to the party, and immediately he starts asking all the usual questions. You know, who are you going with, who is going to be there, whose house is the party at, stuff like that. I answered them all truthfully, although he was a bit annoyed it was at Alex's house. He thought Alex was a bad influence on me, which was probably true. Then he asked me if Alex's parents were going to be there. Normally here I would lie, but I didn't need to do that anymore. Nope. His parents aren't home right now. My dad immediately got a bit angry. You should have told me that at the start. There is no way you are going to that idiot's house with his parents out of town. I replied, I think you will let me go. It would be in both of our best interests. This just made him even angrier. Absolutely not. Do you think I'm stupid or something? I know what goes on there. I let out an evil villain chuckle, and then said, well, I know what's in your system_logs folder on your laptop. Then there was a long moment of silence, and we just stared each other down. Quietly, he says, okay, you can go to Alex's. But system_logs and its content stays between us, understood? Understood.